pull up a chair and get comfortable, because we've got another powerful story for you today on AGS Stories. Family, the people who are supposed to love and support us unconditionally, can sometimes be the very ones who make us feel the most invisible. What happens when years of being overlooked finally reach a breaking point? When a lifetime of quiet sacrifice leads to a moment of truth? Today on AGS Stories, we'll follow Gabriella, a devoted mother and daughter, as she navigates decades of emotional neglect from her family. But this isn't just a tale of pain, it's one of empowerment, justice, and finding her voice after being silenced for so long. If you've ever felt unseen by the people you love most, this story will hit close to home. It's about breaking toxic patterns, reclaiming your identity, and realizing that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is put yourself first. Let's dive in. The envelope arrived on the morning of my birthday. It was thick, cream-colored, and embossed in gold, classic mother style. I didn't need to open it to know what it was, an invitation to my parents' 50th wedding anniversary celebration. A grand affair, no doubt. How fitting, I thought bitterly, that it should arrive today, on my 46th birthday. Another year, another oversight. I stood in the quiet kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. The house was still, empty, but for the faint purr of my cat, Salem, curled on the windowsill. My daughter Ella would be home from college soon, likely with the same apologetic look she always wore when she realized what day it was. She meant well, she always did. But like everyone else, she'd forgotten, until the moment it hit her. My parents, on the other hand, had a perfect track record of never remembering. I turned the envelope over in my hands, the weight of it pressing into my chest. The last 25 years flashed before me. The 30th anniversary party when I was forced to give a toast with a sore throat that turned out to be strep. My 40th birthday dinner, overshadowed because my brother, Ryan, proposed to his girlfriend halfway through dessert. And of course, the Christmas when everyone flew to Aspen without me, claiming they thought I'd made my own plans. Mom! Ella's voice broke through my thoughts as she burst through the door, her backpack sliding off her shoulder. Oh my God, Mom, I forgot, again. She dropped the bag, rushing toward me. Happy birthday, I'm so sorry. I managed a weak smile, brushing off her concern. It's fine, you're here now. She noticed the invitation in my hand, her expression darkening. They sent that today, on your birthday? She grabbed it, scanning the ornate lettering. And they want you to give a speech. Again. I shrugged, forcing a smile. It's fine. No, it's not fine, Ella said, her voice trembling with frustration. She grabbed my hand. Mom, you don't have to do this anymore. For the first time, I didn't dismiss her words. Maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't. That night, after Ella went to bed, I sat alone in the dim light of my laptop. Salem curled up beside me, his rhythmic purring the only sound in the room. My daughter's words played on repeat in my head. You don't have to do this anymore. I knew she was right, but breaking free from a lifetime of family expectations wasn't as easy as it sounded. For years, I'd ignored the voice inside me that screamed for justice, for acknowledgement. Now that voice felt louder than ever. I stared at the blinking cursor, hesitating before opening a new tab. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as doubt crept in. Did anyone really care about my story? Would sharing it change anything? Maybe not. But it felt like a start. I navigated to a popular online advice forum, one I'd lurked on many times but never dared to post in. The anonymity was comforting, and I knew people there wouldn't sugarcoat their opinions. Taking a deep breath, I began to type. Title, Should I Finally Speak Up to My Family, or Is It Too Late? Hi everyone. I'm not sure if this is the right place to post, but I really need some advice. I'm at a crossroads, and I don't know what to do. For context, I'm a 46-year-old single mom to a wonderful daughter, Ella, who's my whole world. But this post isn't about her. It's about the rest of my family and how, for decades, I've felt like an afterthought in their lives. Let me start with a little background. My parents, Ruth and Charles, are pillars of their community, highly respected, always hosting extravagant parties, always doing the right thing in public. They've been married for 50 years, and in 2 weeks, they're throwing a massive anniversary celebration. As always, they've asked me to give a speech about their enduring love and family legacy. It's a tradition, you see. Every milestone anniversary, I'm the one who stands in front of hundreds of people, weaving beautiful words about their devotion and accomplishments. But the truth is, I've spent most of my life feeling invisible to them. Take my birthday, for example. It's never been a priority. Just this morning, my 46th birthday, my parents sent their anniversary invitation. No phone call, no text. Just a reminder of yet another event where I'm expected to celebrate them. This isn't new. When I turned 16, they threw my brother Ryan a huge party for winning some regional tennis tournament. My birthday barely got a mention. When I turned 21, they forgot until the day after, blaming it on anniversary planning. And when I graduated from college, they skipped my ceremony entirely because it conflicted with one of their charity galas. It's not just birthdays, though. It's everything. One Christmas, when I was in my 20s, my whole family planned a trip to Paris. I was so excited, until I found out they forgot to book my ticket. They told me it must have been a mix-up with the travel agent. But deep down, I knew they just didn't think of me. I spent that Christmas alone, watching reruns of holiday movies while they sent pictures from the Eiffel Tower. Then there's the time I had pneumonia. It was during their 40th anniversary party. I told my mom I couldn't give the speech that year, that I could barely stand, let alone talk. She told me to push through it, because family comes first. So, I did. I gave the speech, smiling through the fever, and ended up collapsing in the bathroom halfway through the reception. My brother had to drive me to the ER, but by the next morning, it was like it never happened. No one asked how I was feeling or thanked me for showing up. It was as though my suffering didn't exist. And yet, every year, I show up. I write the speeches. I play the part, because that's what's expected of me. And I've convinced myself it's what a good daughter does. But now, I'm tired, I'm angry, and I don't know how to keep pretending. My daughter says I don't have to do this anymore, and for the first time, I believe her. But there's this voice in my head whispering, what if they're right? What if you're just being dramatic? What if you're selfish? Is it selfish to want my family to see me, really see me? Is it selfish to want a birthday cake, or a hug, or even just a happy birthday text? Part of me wonders if I'm partly to blame for how things have turned out. Maybe I should have stood up for myself years ago. Maybe I should have said no the first time they asked me to prioritize them over myself. But it feels too late now. I'm 46. I've spent my whole life bending over backward to make them happy. What if standing up now just makes things worse? That brings me to their upcoming anniversary. I've written a lot of speeches over the years, but this time, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I want to. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Should I speak up and risk the fallout? Or should I just keep the peace for the sake of the family? Is it too late for my voice to matter? When I finished typing, I read the post over and over again, my stomach twisting with nerves. My cursor hovered over the post button, and for a moment I hesitated. What if they found out? What if I made things worse? But Ella's voice echoed in my mind. You don't have to do this anymore. I clicked post. Within minutes, responses started pouring in. The notifications lit up my screen, one after another, until the entire page was filled with messages. Strangers were reading my story, and for the first time in years, I felt seen. Some responses were short and supportive. You deserve better. Others were longer, filled with personal anecdotes and advice. A few people shared stories of breaking free from toxic family dynamics, while others urged me to consider how empowering it could be to finally stand up for myself. One comment stuck out. The most powerful way to demand respect is to stop asking for it. Stop writing their speeches. Stop showing up for people who won't show up for you. You don't owe them anything. I read that comment over and over, letting the words sink in. Was it really that simple? Could I just stop? The more I read, the clearer things became. This wasn't just about the anniversary or the speeches. It was about years of being treated as an afterthought, about a lifetime of swallowing my pain to keep the peace. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a world where I didn't have to play by their rules anymore, a world where my voice mattered. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The ball was in my court now. The question was, did I have the courage to take the shot? Gabriella hadn't expected her post to resonate so deeply. Within hours, comments flooded in from strangers who in many ways felt more like family than her own. She sat at her laptop, scrolling through the sea of messages. Some were short and encouraging, while others were long, heartfelt, and filled with personal stories. Each one felt like a lifeline, pulling her out of years of isolation. Comment 1, at Family First 88. Gabriella, my heart breaks for you. It sounds like you've been carrying your family's burdens for far too long, without anyone stopping to ask how you feel. Let me tell you something I learned the hard way. You can't keep pouring from an empty cup. You've given enough. Now it's time to prioritize yourself. You're not being selfish by standing up for your needs. You're being brave. Trust me, they'll never see you if you keep letting them treat you like an afterthought. Gabriella reread this comment several times. Was it bravery to finally put herself first, or had she waited so long that it would feel more like rebellion? Comment 2, at Forgotten Daughter 22. Your story hit me like a ton of bricks because it's so similar to mine. My parents also loved playing the perfect family role, and I was the quiet, reliable one they always overlooked. My breaking point was when they made me cancel my engagement party to host a fundraiser for my brother's promotion. I finally said enough was enough and stopped showing up for their events altogether. It was terrifying at first, but it's been the most freeing decision of my life. Please know that you're not alone, and there's a whole world of people rooting for you to find your voice. Gabriella felt an unexpected wave of validation reading this. She wasn't alone. There were others who had felt the same sting of neglect, who had stepped away and found peace. Comment 3, at Tough Love Tim. Listen, Gabriella, I'm not here to sugarcoat things. You're the only one who can change this dynamic. What are you waiting for? Your family has shown you time and time again that they won't respect your boundaries unless you enforce them. I get that it's scary, but what's scarier? Continuing to be invisible for another 20 years, or finally demanding the respect you deserve? The most powerful way to demand respect is to stop asking for it. Stop writing their speeches. Stop being their doormat. The ball is in your court. This one hit her the hardest. Tim's words were blunt but honest, and they left no room for excuses. Gabriella sat back in her chair staring at the screen. The ball was in her court. She'd spent so long waiting for her family to see her, but maybe it was time to stop waiting. The comments were a mix of tough love, shared experiences, and heartfelt advice. Some urged her to sever ties completely, while others suggested finding a balance between standing up for herself and leaving the door open for reconciliation. Yet one thread tied all the responses together: the insistence that her feelings were valid and that it wasn't too late to reclaim her voice. Gabriella scrolled back to it. Tough Love Tim's comment, the words echoing in her mind. The most powerful way to demand respect is to stop asking for it. It sounded so simple, and yet it felt like the hardest thing she'd ever have to do. She opened a notebook and began jotting down her thoughts, the beginnings of a plan forming in her mind. She would show up at the anniversary, not to give the same rehearsed speech, but to finally make her voice heard. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in ages: hope. Gabriella sat at her desk, the weight of the community's responses still pressing on her chest. It had been days since she made her post, and the flood of comments continued to pour in. The words of strangers, both compassionate and firm, had been more validating than anything she'd ever heard from her own family. She knew she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. She was invisible to them, and staying silent wasn't going to change that. But what was she supposed to do? How do you start unraveling decades of being overlooked without blowing everything up in the process? The thought both thrilled and terrified her. That evening, after dinner, Gabriella sat down with her laptop and began typing her follow-up post. Her fingers hesitated over the keys for only a moment before she began to write. Title: Update. Should I speak up to my family? Hi everyone. First of all, thank you for your overwhelming support and advice on my original post. I never expected so many people to care about my story, and it's been eye-opening to see how many of you have gone through something similar. Your words have stayed with me, especially the comment that said, The most powerful way to demand respect is to stop asking for it. That hit me hard, because I realized I've spent my entire life asking for crumbs of acknowledgement that my family isn't willing to give. After reading your responses, I've made a decision. I'm not going to give the anniversary speech. For the first time in 15 years, I'm saying no. I don't want to stand in front of a crowd, spinning pretty lies about a perfect family that doesn't exist. Instead, I'm going to write my own story. My story. I've already started drafting a memoir, and I'm pouring everything into it. The forgotten birthdays, the Christmas trips I wasn't invited to, the times I was sick or struggling, and no one noticed. I don't know what's going to happen when I say no to my parents, and honestly, I'm scared. What if they hate me for speaking up? What if they cut me off completely? Or worse, what if nothing changes at all? These fears have been gnawing at me, but I'm starting to realize that staying silent hurts more. I plan to attend the anniversary, but not on their terms. For the first time, I'm going to show up as myself, not as the dutiful daughter they expect me to be. I don't know what I'll say yet, but I'm done pretending everything is okay. Thank you for helping me see that my voice matters, even if it's just for me. Wish me luck. I'll keep you posted. Gabriella hit post and sat back in her chair, exhaling deeply. The relief of putting her plan into words felt like a small victory. But the real battle was still ahead. The next morning she woke to find Ella in the kitchen, flipping pancakes. "Morning, Mom," Ella said, glancing over her shoulder. "You look like you got some sleep for once." Gabriella smiled. "I did. I think I finally know what I'm going to do about the anniversary." Ella raised an eyebrow, handing her a plate. "Oh, are you giving the speech?" "No," Gabriella said firmly. "I'm not giving them what they want anymore. I've decided to write a memoir instead. I need to tell my side of the story." Ella set down the spatula and turned to face her. "A memoir? Really? Wow, that's huge, Mom." "It feels huge," Gabriella admitted, "and terrifying. What if it doesn't change anything? What if they just see it as me being difficult?" Ella reached across the counter and took her mother's hand. "Mom, listen to me. You've spent your whole life bending over backward for people who don't even notice. This is your chance to stop. Even if they don't change, you're doing this for you, and that's what matters." Gabriella blinked back tears. "When did you get so wise?" Ella grinned. "I learned it from you. Now, finish your pancakes. You're going to need your strength." That evening, Gabriella sat in her office, flipping through old photo albums. Each picture told a story of where she'd been and where she'd been left out. There was the family's 40th anniversary party, where she'd stood in the background of every photo, holding a platter of hors d'oeuvres. The Thanksgiving, where her parents had taken Ryan and his wife to a Broadway show, while Gabriella stayed home to babysit their kids. And of course, the Paris Christmas trip that they forgot to include her in. For years, she'd told herself these were just misunderstandings, moments that didn't mean anything. But now, looking at the pattern laid out before her, she couldn't deny the truth. She had always been an afterthought. Her phone buzzed on the desk, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from her brother Ryan. "Mom's been calling you. She's upset you haven't RSVP'd yet. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Gabriella stared at the message for a long moment before typing her response. "I'll be there, but I won't be giving a speech this year. Please let her know." The reply came almost instantly. "What's that supposed to mean? You've done it every year. Don't start drama now." Gabriella sighed, setting her phone down. She had expected resistance, but it still stung to see how easily her family dismissed her feelings. Did they really think she'd just go along with it forever? For the first time, though, she didn't feel the need to explain herself. Let them be upset. Let them call her dramatic. She was done apologizing for wanting more. Over the next few days, Gabriella threw herself into writing. The words poured out of her like a flood, years of pent-up frustration spilling onto the page. She wrote about her mother's obsession with appearances, her father's silent complicity, and her siblings' constant need to one-up each other. But she also wrote about the small victories. Ella's unwavering support, the strength she'd found in herself, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, things could change. By the time the anniversary approached, Gabriella had the beginnings of a manuscript and a clear sense of what she wanted to say. if the moment called for it. She wouldn't give the speech her parents wanted, but she would speak her truth. Whether or not they listened was up to them. On the morning of the anniversary, Gabriella stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down her dress. Ella appeared in the doorway, holding a steaming cup of coffee. "You ready for this?" she asked. Gabriella took the cup, her reflection meeting Ella's in the mirror. "As ready as I'll ever be." Ella smiled. "You've got this, Mom. They're not ready for you, but you're ready for them, and that's what matters." Gabriella nodded, feeling a strange mix of nerves and resolve. Today wasn't just about her parents' anniversary. It was about breaking the cycle, finding her voice, and finally being seen. As she picked up her purse and headed for the door, she glanced at the manuscript sitting on her desk. It wasn't finished yet, but it was a start, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was finally starting something for herself. Gabriella sat in her office, the soft glow of her desk lamp casting a warm light over her nearly finished manuscript. The anniversary was only days away, and though she felt a deep sense of resolve, the weight of her decision still lingered. The community's reactions to her latest post had been a source of both comfort and challenge, pushing her to confront her fears while validating the steps she was taking. She scrolled through the hundreds of comments on her update, letting the words of strangers wash over her. Each response felt like a small piece of a larger puzzle, helping her piece together what she truly wanted. Not just for the anniversary, but for her life moving forward. Comment 1. @TruthSeeker89. Gabriella, I have chills reading your update. Writing a memoir isn't just about telling your story, it's about reclaiming it. For years, your family has written the narrative of who you are, but now you're flipping the script. That's so powerful. Don't let them silence you. I know it's scary, and yes, family fallout can hurt, but staying silent will hurt more in the long run. You've already taken the hardest step by deciding to prioritize yourself. Keep going. You're doing something not just for you, but for anyone who's ever felt invisible. Gabriella smiled softly at this comment. She had never thought of her story as anything more than her own pain and frustration, but seeing someone frame it as something bigger, as a way to inspire others, made her heart swell. Maybe her words could mean something to more than just herself. Comment 2. @BreakingFree42. Your story hit me hard, Gabriella. 10 years ago, I was in a similar place with my family. Every holiday, every event, I was the one doing all the work while my siblings soaked up the attention. When I finally said I wasn't coming to Christmas one year, my mom called me selfish and my siblings accused me of abandoning the family. It was brutal, but you know what? It was also the first time I felt free. It took years, but we've slowly rebuilt our relationships, and now they respect my boundaries. You're on the right path. Stay strong. Change takes time, but it starts with courage. Gabriella's chest tightened as she read this. It mirrored so much of her own struggle, and it was comforting to know that standing up for herself didn't mean she was burning bridges forever. There was hope, even if it came slowly. As she finished reading, Gabriella leaned back in her chair, letting the words settle. The community's support was like a lighthouse, guiding her through the storm. She wasn't sure what would happen at the anniversary, but for the first time, she felt prepared to face it head-on. No matter how her family reacted, she was finally stepping into the spotlight. And this time, she wasn't stepping back. Would her family see her? Maybe. Maybe not. But she saw herself, and that was the most important start of all. The day of the anniversary arrived, and Gabriella found herself standing outside her parents' sprawling house, the familiar hum of voices and laughter drifting through the open windows. The air smelled of freshly trimmed grass and expensive catering, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside her chest. She clutched the black leather-bound copy of her memoir, its gold-embossed title catching the sunlight, The Art of Invisibility. This wasn't just a book. It was her truth, and today she would hand it over. Ella stood beside her, offering a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You ready?" she asked softly. Gabriella took a deep breath, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. "No, but I'm going in anyway." They walked through the grand entrance, where guests in tailored suits and cocktail dresses mingled, glasses of champagne in hand. Her mother, Ruth, stood at the center of it all, radiant in an emerald green gown, smiling as if this was the most perfect day of her life. Gabriella spotted her father Charles lingering by the bar, avoiding small talk like he always did. Ryan and his wife were laughing with a group of distant relatives, oblivious to her presence. No one noticed Gabriella's arrival. It was as if she was invisible again, just like all the other times. Ella leaned in and whispered, "They'll see you soon enough, Mom." When Ruth finally spotted Gabriella, her smile faltered for just a moment before she composed herself. "Gabriella, darling, you're late," she said, her tone clipped. "We need to go over your speech. Everyone's expecting it." Gabriella held up the book. "I'm not giving a speech today." Ruth froze, her perfectly polished facade cracking. "What do you mean, you're not giving a speech? You've done it every year. It's tradition." Gabriella met her mother's gaze, her voice steady. "I won't stand up there and tell lies about a perfect family that doesn't exist. This," she held out the book, "is my truth. I think it's time you read it." Ruth's eyes darted to the book and then back to Gabriella, confusion turning to anger. "You wrote a book about us? What are you thinking? Do you have any idea how this will make us look?" "It's not about how it makes you look, Mother," Gabriella said, her voice rising. "It's about how it made me feel, being ignored, dismissed, and treated like I didn't matter for 46 years. You've never once seen me. This book is the only way I know how to make you see." The room had gone silent, all eyes now fixed on the two of them. Gabriella's siblings exchanged nervous glances, while her father shifted uncomfortably by the bar. "Gabriella, don't do this here," Ruth hissed, her cheeks flushed. "This is a celebration of our family." "That's exactly what I'm doing," Gabriella replied, her voice firm. "I'm celebrating by finally being honest." Gabriella turned to the crowd, her voice shaking but determined. "I've given 15 years' worth of speeches about my parents' love and devotion, but I've never once been asked how I felt standing in the background of their perfect picture. They forgot my 16th birthday because of a tennis tournament. They skipped my college graduation for a gala, and they didn't even buy me a ticket to Christmas in Paris." A murmur rippled through the room. Ruth's hands trembled as she clutched her champagne glass. "You're exaggerating. We've always loved you." "Loved me?" Gabriella said, her voice breaking. "You've never even noticed me, Mother. When I had pneumonia at your 40th anniversary, you told me to push through it so I could give my speech. I ended up in the ER, and no one even cared." Charles cleared his throat, stepping forward. "Ruth, she's right," he said quietly. "I've seen it all these years. We failed her." Ruth spun toward him, disbelief etched across her face. "You're taking her side?" "I'm not taking sides," Charles said, his voice heavy with regret. "I'm admitting that we ignored her, because it was easier to focus on the things that made us look good. She's been invisible, and we let it happen." Gabriella felt tears sting her eyes as her father's words sank in. For the first time, he was acknowledging her pain. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. The tension in the room was palpable as Ruth's anger gave way to something Gabriella had never seen before: vulnerability. She placed her glass on a nearby table and stared at her daughter. "I didn't mean to make you feel invisible," she whispered. I thought we were giving you everything you needed." "You gave me things, Mother," Gabriella said, her voice softening. "But what I needed was to feel like I mattered." Ruth reached for the book, her hands trembling as she took it from Gabriella. "I'll read it," she said finally. "I don't know if I'll like it, but I'll read it." The room slowly returned to life as the guests murmured among themselves, unsure of what to say. Gabriella turned to Ella, who smiled at her with pride. Later that evening, as the party continued, Gabriella slipped out to the garden for some fresh air. Charles followed her, holding a small velvet box. "Gabriella," he said, his voice hesitant. "I've been holding on to this for years. I bought it for your 16th birthday, but I never gave it to you." He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver bracelet, its surface shimmering in the moonlight. Gabriella's breath caught in her throat as he fastened it around her wrist. "I'm sorry," he said, "for all of it." Gabriella looked up at him, her heart aching with a mix of sadness and hope. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from the anniversary lingered, but so did small signs of change. Ruth sent Gabriella a handwritten note apologizing for the past and promising to do better. Charles started calling her every Sunday, just to check in. And on her desk sat a new calendar Ruth had sent her, with Gabriella's birthday circled in bright red ink. Gabriella's memoir gained attention, with early reviews calling it a raw and unflinching look at family dynamics. Strangers wrote to her, sharing their own stories of feeling unseen. For the first time, Gabriella felt like her voice mattered, not just to others, but to herself. As she closed the chapter on her invisibility, Gabriella felt a lightness she hadn't known in years. She was no longer just a background character in someone else's story. She was finally the author of her own. As Gabriella sat in her office weeks after the anniversary, the sunlight streamed through the window, warming the desk where her newly released memoir rested. It had been a whirlwind of emotions, standing up to her family, hearing their first apologies, and watching her story resonate with so many others. For the first time in years, she felt lighter, freer, and finally seen. Reflecting on everything that had transpired, Gabriella realized the most profound lesson of all. Standing up for herself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. For too long, she had prioritized her family's comfort over her own pain, convincing herself that keeping the peace was worth sacrificing her sense of self. But now, she understood that valuing herself wasn't just an act of rebellion. It was an act of survival. Her decision to step out of the shadows and reclaim her voice had been terrifying. She'd wrestled with guilt, fear, and the nagging doubt that nothing would change. But she was wrong. Change had started the moment she chose herself, and it had rippled outward, into her family, her relationships, and even the lives of strangers who had read her book. One thing was clear: change doesn't come from waiting for others to value you. It begins when you decide to value yourself. To anyone who's ever felt invisible or overlooked, Gabriella's journey is a reminder that it's never too late to speak up. She faced a lifetime of neglect, but by choosing to tell her story, she opened a door to healing, not just for herself, but for her family as well. While their relationships were far from perfect, the steps they were taking toward reconciliation gave her hope. And more importantly, it gave her closure. Have you ever found yourself in Gabriella's shoes? Have you felt unseen, unheard, or stuck in a toxic dynamic that made you question your worth? If so, how did you find your voice? Or are you still searching for it? Whatever your journey looks like, know this: your story matters, and your voice deserves to be heard. If Gabriella's story resonated with you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you experienced something similar? What advice would you give to someone facing the same struggles? Share your story in the comments below. We're building a community where everyone's voice matters. And if you're ready for more empowering narratives, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to AGS Stories, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Together, we can keep sharing stories that inspire courage, healing, and change. Your story could be the next one to change someone's life.